Hey everyone. Tonight we begin in a hushed alleyway, beneath the gaze of a loudspeaker crackling with praise for the supreme leader, while the rest of the city holds its breath. You've heard stories of defectors slipping across frozen rivers, of famine, of silence. But the real North Korea, it's not just isolation. It's a blueprint of fear etched into every streetlight, every schoolbook, every whispered glance. This isn't just another reclusive regime. It's loyalty measured in bloodlines, faith punished with labor, and obedience carved into the bones of children too young to understand the anthem they're forced to sing. If peeling back the darkest masks of modern history helps you drift off, please like and subscribe. And tell me, where are you listening from? And what freedom would you miss most if it vanished overnight? Now dim the lights, close the curtains tight, and follow me into a nation where truth is contraband, and silence is the only language left unpunished. The North Korean regime doesn't need you to rebel. It doesn't need you to act, speak, or even think out loud. In fact, it doesn't need you to do anything at all. The mere fact that you exist born into the wrong family, humming the wrong melody, holding the wrong belief in the quietest corner of your mind can be enough to mark you as a threat. In this system, crime is not a fixed category. It is a shifting shadow, cast by ideology, suspicion, or convenience. A joke overheard by a neighbor, a radio frequency caught by mistake, a prayer whispered too long. These are not accidents here. They are evidence. You don't inherit rights in North Korea. You inherit classification. The Songbun system, implemented in the 1950s, divides citizens into social categories based on perceived loyalty. Your grandfather's mistake, real or imagined, becomes your burden. A cousin's defection, a sibling's careless comment, even a friend's unverified connection abroad can stain your record. This label follows you. It determines whether you attend university, join the military, or receive full rations. It decides if you live in Pyongyang or rot in a rural collective farm. It is not your actions, but your blood, your associations, your silence or lack of it that shapes your fate. Religious faith is treated not as a private matter, but a defection of the soul. Possessing a Bible is enough to be sentenced to a political prison camp. Attending secret services, even in one's own home, is seen as organizing rebellion. Children are taught from their earliest years to report their parents. Loyalty belongs to the leader, not to family, not to truth, not even to one's own mind. Thought control begins in childhood, reinforced by self-criticism sessions, school chants, and state-approved textbooks. Questioning the official narrative is not dissent. It is criminal intent. And intent, in this system, does not need to be proven, only perceived. The result is a society of watchers and watched, where everyone is both prisoner and warden. Conversations lower to whispers. Eye contact becomes risky. Songs from outside are dangerous. Books are copied by hand in the dark. Silence, once a refuge, becomes exhausting. You learn to bury your real thoughts so deep, you begin to forget where you placed them. The only safe opinion is the one the regime hands you, and even that, if repeated with the wrong tone or at the wrong time, can become suspect. In North Korea, control is not simply about obedience. It's about uncertainty, about keeping every citizen in a state of suspended fear, where survival depends on staying invisible. Because here, guilt is not proven, it is presumed, and innocence is irrelevant. One morning, the familiar rhythm of your life, that quiet hum of routine, is abruptly shattered. No sirens, No formal summons. No knock on the door allowing you a moment to collect yourself. You might be walking along a dusty street, or perhaps at home, sipping meager tea. Suddenly, you feel a presence, a firm grip on your arm, and the world tilts. The air grows cold. A chill creeps into your bones, deeper than any winter wind. No warrant, no explanation, no legal formality, just quiet, swift, undeniable action. You are seized. Your eyes, wide with primal fear, search for answers, but find none. Then, a rough cloth presses against your face, and the world goes dark. You are blindfolded. The sudden loss of sight amplifies everything, the coldness of the hand that guides you, the muffled sounds of footsteps, the unsettling sensation of being led into an unknown void. Your body tenses, muscles coiling. You're pushed into a vehicle, maybe a truck, smelling faintly of dust and metal. The journey is disorienting, twists and turns, rhythmic jolting, making it impossible to gauge direction. Time stretches and contracts. You are completely isolated, separated from everything you know. Your name, your identity, your history, they begin to feel like distant echoes, fading into the dark. Then, you are led into a cell, pitch black. A darkness so profound it presses in from all sides. The air is thick with damp earth, stale sweat, and something acrid, metallic. You reach out, fingers brushing rough, cold concrete walls. Then something damp and slimy on the floor. The chill seeps into your clothing, through to your skin, down to your marrow. No explanation. No voice to tell you why you are here, what your supposed transgression might be. Just oppressive silence, broken only by your ragged breath and the frantic pounding of your heart. The days that follow bleed into weeks, marked only by the shifting light you cannot see. Weeks of relentless interrogations begin. They are not about seeking truth, but about breaking you. Questions repeat, endless variations on the same theme, designed to wear down your spirit, erode your will. You sit on a hard, cold stool, or the damp ground, your head aching from the strain. Voices are flat, monotonous, sometimes rising to a sharp bark. Your mind, once a sanctuary of private thoughts, is now a battlefield, relentlessly probed. Physical torture, too, becomes a quiet, constant threat, sometimes an agonizing reality. It's a tool not of punishment, but of persuasion. You learn the precise ache of your joints, the throb behind your eyes, the constant tremor in your hands. Sleep offers little respite, haunted by the echoes of your waking torment. Eventually, confessions are extracted, not through clarity, but through the crushing weight of coercion, a desperate longing for the pain to cease, for the ceaseless questioning to end. You would say anything, promise anything, for a moment of peace. For many, this ordeal culminates in a show trial, a grotesque parody of justice where the verdict is predetermined, the outcome already sealed. You stand before figures in dark robes, their faces obscured, their voices echoing with pronouncements bearing no resemblance to fairness or truth. For countless others, there is no trial at all, not even a fabricated one. They simply vanish, swallowed by the vast, silent machinery of the state. They become a blank space in the fabric of existence, a name whispered once, then lost to the wind. The journey to the courthouse is not one of hope. but of chilling certainty. You are led through dim corridors, air thick with dampness, faint scent of old wood. Outside sounds are muffled, distant. This isn't a grand hall of justice, but a stark, utilitarian room. Light is dim, casting unsettling shadows, the air heavy with suppression. You're ushered into a space where justice is inverted. Here, the Supreme Court is a singular, all-encompassing entity, both initial trial and final appeal. No higher authority, no independent review, no second chance. Once a verdict is rendered, it is absolute, an unyielding decree. You feel the weight of this finality, a crushing certainty leaving no room for hope. The figures presiding over this charade aren't guided by legal principles or evidence. They follow direct orders from the state, their pronouncements echoing the supreme leader's will. Their gaze is impassive, devoid of empathy. You are not a person, not an individual with rights. You are a problem to be solved, a deviation to be corrected, a message to be sent. These courts, you understand, are not designed to protect the accused. They are meticulously crafted instruments, honed over decades, to enforce loyalty, instill absolute obedience. Every ruling, every sentence, serves a larger purpose to tighten the invisible chains of control. You are a lesson, a warning, a silent declaration that dissent, even in thought, will not be tolerated. Sometimes, a sentence of re-education is pronounced. To an outsider, it sounds innocuous. But you know it means endless ideological training, a relentless reprogramming of your mind, a slow, methodical erasure of your individuality, your personal thoughts, your very spirit, replaced by the state's doctrine. You are to be molded until you become a perfect, unthinking cog in the regime's machine. You imagine the ceaseless droning, the repetitive chants, the forced confessions of your errors, until words lose all meaning, becoming a dull ache. The ultimate power behind this entire apparatus emanates from a single source, the Supreme Leader. He is the ultimate arbiter of truth, right and wrong, justice and punishment. His word is law, his will absolute. You feel this omnipresent force, like an unseen current, guiding every action, every decision. In this silent hall, you realize you are not truly on trial before a court of law, but before an all-encompassing, unforgiving power that seeks not to judge, but to control, utterly and completely. You are merely a fleeting shadow in its vast, unyielding presence. Again, the blindfold descends, and the world shrinks to suffocating darkness. You are moved once more, the journey longer, the vehicle less comfortable. The rough road beneath the wheels becomes a ceaseless tremor, vibrations settling into your bones. You try to orient yourself, but twists and turns are relentless, designed to disorient, to erase any sense of a known path. The air grows colder, thinner, hinting at a landscape far removed from populated areas. Finally, the vehicle lurches to a halt. You are led out, blindfold still firmly in place. The silence is profound, broken only by a distant whisper of wind or the faint, metallic creak of a gate. You are in a remote, desolate place, a landscape chosen for isolation, its vast emptiness. You stand on uneven ground, the chill of the earth seeping up through your worn shoes. This is where those who committed the unforgivable sin of existing outside the state's favor are brought. This is where you are welcomed into the camps. You learn, slowly, agonizingly, that there are different depths to this living death. Two distinct types of camps exist. The total control zones, from which there is no return, no hope of release. Here, you are sentenced to life. But a life stripped bare of dignity, humanity, and purpose beyond forced labor and slow decay. It is absolute, irreversible erasure. You imagine the silent, gaunt faces of those here for years, decades, their eyes holding the blankness of unending emptiness. Then there are the revolutionary zones, temporary detentions where a faint ember of hope might still exist. But this hope is a cruel illusion, a mirage receding with every passing day. Conditions are brutal, labor crushing, hunger a constant companion. The path to release, if it exists, is shrouded in uncertainty and arbitrary whim. You realize even this faint possibility is a tool, a way to extract more labor, obedience, despair, a thread dangled, only to be snatched away. But perhaps the most chilling truth you uncover is the insidious reach of punishment here. It is not limited to the individual. No, here, the sins of one are visited upon the many. Family-based punishment is not a relic of the past, but a cruel, active practice. Entire families, parents, siblings, children, even distant relatives can be imprisoned for the crime of one person. You feel a sickening lurch as this reality sinks in. Your heart aches with the knowledge that your own presence here might mean the silent suffering of those you hold dear. Their lives shattered, futures stolen, simply because they shared your blood, your name. You picture the quiet agony of parents separated from their children, or children forced to endure the unspeakable because of a grandparent's perceived error. It is a system designed to atomize, to break fundamental human bonds, ensuring every individual lives not just for themselves, but for the collective fear, their every action dictated by the potential devastation it could bring upon their loved ones. As the gates clang shut behind you, a sound echoing with dreadful finality, you realize you have entered a world where the very definition of family and its sacred bonds has been weaponized against you. Each new day in this place begins not with a gentle seep of dawn, but with a gnawing ache deep within your stomach. You wake in cramped cells, air heavy and stale, scent of damp earth and unwashed bodies clinging to everything. Your bed, a rough wooden platform, is often infested with unseen creatures, a persistent itch, a constant reminder of degradation. Water, when offered, is cloudy, tasting faintly of metal and something stagnant, yet you drink it. Meals are not sustenance, but fleeting rituals of quiet desperation. Your daily ration, a handful of dirt-contaminated rice, or a piece of moldy bread, like dry dust in your mouth. Once a week, a single boiled egg might appear a rare, almost luxurious protein, offering momentary satiation before hunger returns, fiercer than before. You learn to chew slowly, to make each mouthful last. Your body, once strong, begins its slow, relentless transformation. Limbs grow thin, skin stretches taut over bones, eyes sink back, dull and hollow. Then comes the labor, back-breaking, relentless. A physical torment consuming your waking hours. Sent to frozen fields, ground hard as stone, your breath misting in frigid air. Little to no tools, often forced to work with bare hands, scratching at unforgiving earth, lifting heavy stones. Fingers crack and bleed, muscles scream, but you push on. Knowing to stop is to invite a guard's boot or the sting of a whip. The monotony is as exhausting as the physical demands. Malnutrition is not a temporary affliction. It is a pervasive, ever-present state. You see it in the gaunt faces around you, the listless eyes, the slow, shuffling gait of fellow prisoners. Your own body, once vibrant, now feels like a fragile shell, on the verge of collapse. The internal struggle is a daily battle against fading light, pervasive weakness. You watch as others, weaker, simply cease to move, their bodies succumbing to relentless hunger, untreated illnesses that spread like wildfire. Medical care is a cruel joke, an almost non-existent concept. A cough racks your chest, a fever burns, a wound festers. But there is no medicine, no skilled hand to offer healing. You fight alone. Statistics speak the stark reality: up to 40% of prisoners here die. Not from direct violence, but from the slow, agonizing grip of starvation or untreated illness. You witness this quiet exodus daily, the silent removal of bodies, leaving behind an empty space, a chilling reminder of your own precarious existence. Each day, you feel a little less alive, a subtle erosion of spirit, of body, as if you are slowly, quietly dying. In this desolate landscape, pain is not merely a consequence. It is a meticulously crafted language, a systemic tool for control and a chilling form of communication. You learn its alphabet through the cries echoing in the dim light of dawn, through the silent tremors of fear rippling through lines of prisoners. Common torture methods are not random acts of cruelty, but precise, calculated inflictions designed to break the spirit, ensure absolute submission. You hear whispers of pigeon torture, arms tied tightly behind the back, then hoisted, suspending the victim from above. The body hangs, contorted, joints screaming, muscles tearing under impossible strain. Then, the rhythmic thud of blows, landing with sickening finality. You hear gasps, choked cries, and avert your gaze, wishing your ears too could close. The memory of that contorted shape, the sound of suffering, imprints itself, a constant reminder of how far the human body can be pushed. Sometimes, punishment is a cell so small, so impossibly cramped, you can neither fully stand nor truly lie down, forced into a constant crouch, muscles burning, limbs aching with unbearable pressure. Time stretches, endless hours confined in this living coffin. Darkness presses in, amplifying claustrophobia, raw despair. Every muscle screams, every breath labored, your mind fraying, desperate for any space. Random beatings are common, for the slightest infraction, often for no discernible reason. A gaze held too long, a slow response, a body faltering from exhaustion. Blows come suddenly, sharply, without warning, leaving a dull ache, a bruised landscape of pain. You learn to anticipate the swing of a baton, the crack of a whip, to brace yourself. But perhaps the most chilling spectacle is the routine of public executions. They are not hidden. They are a carefully orchestrated theater, a brutal lesson delivered to all who watch. You are forced to witness them, standing in lines, eyes fixed on the grim tableau. You see the hanging, the swift, terrible fall. You hear the sharp crack of rifle fire, its finality echoing. Sometimes, even the ancient, visceral act of beheading is performed, a horrifying tableau designed to instill primal terror. These are not merely deaths. They are messages, etched in blood and fear, a stark warning to anyone harboring thoughts of defiance. The cruelty intensifies as you are forced to participate. If an escapee is captured, before their execution. You and your fellow prisoners are compelled to pick up stones, to throw them at the condemned figure. Your hands tremble, heart pounds, but you must obey. Each stone thrown is a piece of your humanity chipped away, forced complicity in an act of barbarism. Even children, you realize with sickening dread, are not spared from witnessing these horrors. Their young eyes are forced to absorb images that will forever scar their developing minds. Death, in this place, is not just an end. It is a performance, a relentless deterrent, a chilling message delivered through the ultimate form of terror, ensuring fear runs deep, binding everyone to their assigned place. As you endure the camp's horrors, you observe those who hold the keys, the guards. You see their uniforms, impassive faces, hands that deliver meager rations and crushing blows. But hidden beneath their rigid exterior is an unseen battle, the subtle chains binding them too. Former defected guards describe a chilling process of ideological brainwashing. From their earliest service, they were systematically trained to view prisoners not as fellow human beings, but as subhuman monsters. You are not a person who made a mistake or dared to think a forbidden thought. You are a traitor, a pest, an enemy of the state, devoid of worth. This indoctrination, a slow, corrosive poison, seeped into their being, shaping their thoughts, actions. It was complete dehumanization, stripping away empathy, connection, shared humanity. You were simply a category, a problem to be managed, controlled, discarded. They were taught that the suffering they inflicted was not cruelty, but justice. Starvation, torture, forced labor, all necessary to cleanse society, protect ideology. In this distorted reality, compassion became weakness, mercy a betrayal. They were molded into unfeeling instruments, their moral compasses dismantled, replaced with brutal directives. Yet, for some, cracks eventually appeared. When these guards defected, standing outside the regime's control, a horrifying truth dawned. The monsters they despised were often innocent people starving families. Christians holding silent faith, individuals whose lives had been unjustly shattered. This realization, for those who experienced it, must have been a crushing weight, a profound betrayal of their own humanity. They had been tools, unwitting participants in systemic cruelty, their minds warped to accept the unspeakable. Cruelty became easy, logical. Once prisoners were stripped of humanity, you imagine the hollowness in their chests, the ghosts of faces they'd seen, cries they'd ignored. Even the guards, you realize, were not truly free. They were prisoners of a different kind. Their minds shackled by an ideology that demanded the sacrifice of their own souls. As you exist within this silent, suffocating world, you may hear whispers, distant echoes, of those who are different, the foreigners. Their presence here is a strange anomaly, a fleeting glimmer of the outside world, yet fraught with unique dangers. Figures like Otto Warmbier, a young American student, or Pastor Lim, a Canadian missionary, become names whispered in hushed tones, symbols of a distinct kind of captivity. For these foreign detainees, camp rules take on an unsettling dimension. Unlike domestic prisoners who fade into anonymous suffering, foreigners are sometimes treated with peculiar caution. You might observe they are kept healthier, given slightly better diets, perhaps even medication denied to your countrymen. This is not genuine concern, but cold calculation. They are valuable pawns, instruments for propaganda, leverage, and international diplomacy. You imagine their brief, carefully monitored interviews, their words weighed, expressions scrutinized. Perhaps occasional, fleeting communication with families is allowed. Messages meticulously censored, twisted to fit the regime's narrative. These small allowances, seemingly humane, are merely a veneer, a thin facade, projecting an image of a benevolent state, while true horrors remain hidden. But beneath this illusion, the chilling reality persists. Torture and death, though perhaps less frequent than for domestic prisoners, remain ever-present shadows. The case of Otto Warmbier stands as a stark, horrifying testament. Released in a coma, he died days after arriving in U.S. custody, his body, his mind, irreparably broken by the ordeal. Pastor Lim, too, survived. But his survival was not mercy. It was a direct result of relentless diplomatic pressure, tireless negotiation on the global stage. He was a bargaining chip. You recognize the subtle power dynamics. Lives become commodities, traded in a chilling geopolitical game. The foreigner's cage, perhaps gilded with a different metal, adorned with more comforts, is a cage nonetheless. The bars are still there. Freedom remains an illusion, and the constant threat of arbitrary power, of a life extinguished without consequence, looms as large as for any other prisoner. Their existence here is a stark reminder that even those with the backing of distant nations are not immune. They are a fragile bridge, connecting the darkness within to the uncertain light beyond their fates, a chilling lesson in the true cost of this isolated realm. As you move through your days, you begin to understand that the camp walls, formidable as they are merely an outer layer of a far larger, more pervasive prison. This entire nation, you realize with cold, creeping certainty, is a meticulously constructed cage. Its bars are not iron, but invisible threads, surveillance, informants, fear. You walk through seemingly normal streets, yet feel constant, unseen eyes upon you. Every shadow might hold a listener, every neighbor a potential informant, driven by fear or misguided loyalty. You learn to speak in generalities, to choose words with surgical precision, lest an innocent remark be twisted against you. The internet, that vast ocean of information, is forbidden a distant myth. Your access to the outside world is meticulously controlled, filtered through the narrow lens of state propaganda. You live in an echo chamber where only approved narratives resonate, where alternative ideas are actively erased. Your freedom of movement is a cruel illusion. Every step, every journey, however small, is subject to permission, to scrutiny. You cannot simply visit a relative, explore a new city, or seek opportunity elsewhere. Your life, your path, is predetermined, mapped out by unseen authority. Citizens here live under a pervasive, chilling blanket of fear. It's a quiet, constant hum beneath daily life. You see it in averted gazes, quickening steps when an official passes. The careful, almost choreographed interactions. One wrong word, a fleeting expression, a misinterpreted gesture, any can shatter your life, and far worse, destroy your entire family. The weight of this responsibility, this constant vigilance, is an oppressive burden. You live not just for yourself, but for the collective survival of loved ones. Knowing your actions, however small, can bring unimaginable devastation. Even outside the brutal confines of labor camps, daily life is a silent sentence, a slow, Methodical erasure under totalitarian control. Your very existence dictated. Choices pre-approved. Thoughts guided. You wake, work, eat, sleep all within parameters designed to ensure conformity, to prevent the faintest ripple of independent thought. The air you breathe feels heavy with unspoken rules. The landscape a vast stage where every actor plays their assigned part, endlessly. You realize that whether behind bars or walking the streets, you are still a prisoner, bound by unseen chains, your spirit slowly bending to the will of an omnipresent, unyielding power. The silence that fills your days is not peaceful. It is the silence of absolute control, the stillness of a world held captive. As this long journey through a silent, terrifying world draws to a close, you are left with a chilling, undeniable understanding. The reality here is far, far worse than anything you could have imagined. The whispers, the fleeting glimpses of cruelty, are merely fragments of a horror that runs deeper than any official report can convey. You hear echoes of revelations that shock the conscience of the outside world, if they are even permitted to be heard. A 2017 report by the International Bar Association, a distant echo from a world that values justice, brought forth truths too monstrous to be real. Executions, not for grave political acts, but for the most basic acts of survival. Imagine a mother executed for picking edible roots, desperate to feed her starving children. Or a man shot for stealing a handful of food, his hunger outweighing his fear. These are not from the immediacy of pain. The black humor, ever present, ever cutting, captures this truth. Drugs don't make you live longer. They just make death prettier. In this desolate landscape, where life is a constant struggle, these brief, drug-induced escapes become the only true moments of autonomy. The only times you feel a fleeting sense of control over your own unbearable reality. For many who arrived at the Gulag, transported in those rattling cattle cars, their bodies and minds were unmarred by the grip of addiction. They came as innocent, or at least clean. They left, if they were fortunate enough to leave at all, as addicts. The Gulag, with its brutal efficiency, did not merely break bodies and spirits. It systematically forged new dependencies, weaving invisible chains that would bind its survivors long after the barbed wire fences were behind them. You witness this transformation, a slow, insidious process that leaves an indelible mark. The desperate cravings born of cold, hunger, and despair become deeply ingrained habits, etched into the very fabric of their being. Years, sometimes decades later, you might encounter these freed men, spectral figures haunting the edges of society. Their clothes are no longer rags, their faces perhaps a little less gaunt, but their eyes still hold the distant, haunted look of the camps. And you observe, with a chilling sense of recognition, the telltale signs of their enduring captivity. Their hands tremble, a nervous energy that never quite leaves them, even in the warmth of a city cafe. Their gazes dart around, perpetually searching, perpetually anxious. They beg, not for bread, but for cigarettes. Their voices raspy, their pleas tinged with the same desperate urgency you knew in the barracks, a half-smoked butt, discarded carelessly on the street. still holds the magnetic pull it did in the frozen wastes. The nicotine, the alcohol, the morphine, they have burrowed deep, becoming an integral part of their physiological and psychological landscape. The Gulag, in its grim irony, turned addiction into a life sentence. Even if the physical gates opened, even if the icy wind of Siberia no longer whipped at their faces, the prison had found a way to follow them. The craving for that fleeting warmth, that momentary escape, became an internal guard, a constant taskmaster. Their bodies, their minds, had been rewired to seek that solace, to chase that fading ember of peace. They were free. Yes, but forever bound to the mechanisms of survival they had learned in the camps, the black humor, whispered and grimly accepted within the Gulag's walls, takes on a new, more profound meaning when you witness these specters of the past. You can leave the Gulag, but the Gulag never leaves your lungs. It is a haunting truth, a testament to the insidious power of the camp, a final, cruel twist of fate that ensured the suffering would continue, silently, endlessly, long after the last prisoner had stumbled out into the uncertain light of a fragile freedom. Joseph Stalin, in his chilling vision, conceived of the Gulag as a crucible, a brutal forge designed to temper and shape the new Soviet man. He envisioned a society purged of dissent, where individuals would be re-educated, their wills bent to the collective, their spirits transformed into unyielding instruments of the state. Yet, the outcome was a profound and tragic irony, a stark repudiation of his utopian ideal. Instead of a new breed of devoted communists, the Gulag forged a society of the broken, of criminals hardened by desperation, of addicts enslaved by their cravings, and of bodies ravaged beyond repair, their spirits hollowed out by unimaginable suffering. The vast, frozen expanse of the Gulag, meant to cleanse and rebuild, became instead a breeding ground for every vice it sought to eliminate. In a world utterly devoid of freedom, of choice, of even the most basic human dignity, drugs became the last remaining vestige of autonomy. The cigarette, the crude vodka, the stolen morphine. These were not merely substances. They were symbols. They represented a defiant, desperate claim to a moment of self-possession, a fleeting whisper of control in a life where all control had been stripped away. They were the last freedom left, a bitter, dangerous kind of liberty purchased at an unimaginable cost. As you stand, perhaps, at the edge of this desolate memory, the final image that lingers is a stark and poignant one, a wisp of smoke, rising from a desperate hand, spiraling upwards into the vast, indifferent expanse of the Siberian night. It is a fragile, ephemeral thing, a transient breath against the enduring cold. And as you watch it, it slowly, inevitably, vanishes into nothingness, dissipating into the endless, star-pricked sky. It is a perfect metaphor for the lives consumed here, for the hopes that were crushed, for the spirits that simply faded away. The black humor, that constant, grim companion throughout the Gulag's nightmare, offers a final, cutting observation that encapsulates the profound failure of Stalin's vision. History called it re-education. Prisoners called it a national addiction. And as the silence settles, broken only by the whisper of the wind over the snow, you are left with the chilling understanding that the true legacy of the Gulag was not a new man, but a generation forever marked by desperation, by dependency, and by the indelible memory of those last, precious moments of escape, purchased with a puff of smoke or a gulp of fire. Our journey commences in the fading light of June 1941, a time steeped in a tense, almost palpable quiet before the storm. Imagine, if you will, the vast, undulating landscape stretching across Eastern Europe, dotted with small villages, ancient forests, and winding rivers. Here, amidst the gentle murmur of anticipation, stood the formidable, yet profoundly human, Red Army. When we look back at the images and narratives of this era, the immediate impression is often one of a monolithic, unyielding force. A steel-clad army, as the propaganda of the time so fiercely proclaimed. Yet, as we delicately peel back the layers of history, a different, more nuanced truth emerges. A truth woven into the very fabric of their everyday existence, their humble gear, and their quiet determination. In those pivotal weeks leading up to Operation Barbarossa, the massive German invasion, the Red Army found itself in a state of rapid, almost frantic, expansion. Millions of young men, many barely out of their teens, were called to serve, drawn from the far-flung corners of the Soviet Union. They arrived at training camps, often with little more than the clothes on their backs, ready to be molded into soldiers. This immense influx of personnel created an unprecedented demand for equipment, a demand that the burgeoning Soviet industrial complex struggled to meet with consistent quality and quantity. The reality, therefore, was far removed from the idealized image. These were not legions clad in gleaming armor, but rather men equipped with gear that was, by many accounts, simple, robust, and at times, even crude. The great question that hung silently in the air, unspoken but felt deeply by every officer and every recruit, was whether this seemingly inexpensive, yet versatile, equipment could truly provide them with the means to survive the unimaginable ordeal that lay ahead. It was a gamble, a stark testament to the pragmatic, often austere, philosophy that underscored Soviet military doctrine. Every single item issued to a soldier, from the heaviest canvas greatcoat to the smallest wooden spoon, held within it the potential for life or death. A reliable rain cape could prevent pneumonia. A sturdy canteen could stave off dehydration. A well-maintained rifle was, quite literally, the difference between living and perishing. The very concept of a military uniform, of standard issue equipment, speaks to an attempt to normalize and manage the chaos of war. Yet, for these soldiers, each item transcended its utilitarian purpose to become something more profound. It became a silent companion, a protector, a fragile link to survival. The weight of their rucksacks, the feel of their simple boots on the ground, the texture of their woolen greatcoats, these were not just material possessions. They were extensions of their very being, tools in the most fundamental struggle for existence. As we gently imagine those columns of Red Army soldiers marching, their greatcoats rolled neatly around their rucksacks, their helmets swinging with a rhythmic cadence, let us not see only the collective, but the individual within. Each man, with his own hopes and fears, his own memories of home, and his own quiet resolve, carried the burden of his nation's fate, quite literally, on his back. And it is with this understanding, this empathetic perspective, that we begin to unpack the layers of their reality. Starting with the very heart of their personal kit, the humble rucksack that carried their world. This quiet opening, this initial step into their reality, sets the stage for a journey not of grand battles, but of quiet endurance, of resourcefulness, and of the profound human spirit that found strength in scarcity. The stage is set. The curtain, for now, remains drawn on the dramatic events to come, allowing us a peaceful moment to prepare for an intimate encounter with history. Before anything else, let's open the M39 rucksack, that iconic and understated symbol of a Soviet soldier, a testament to practical design under the looming shadow of conflict. This wasn't merely a bag. It was the soldier's portable world, containing the sparse necessities that would sustain him through unimaginable hardships. Introduced in 1939, this rucksack was a masterclass in compromise, compact enough to be carried by millions, affordable enough for mass production, yet remarkably practical in its design, its appearance almost unassuming, belied the critical role it played in the daily life and survival of the Red Army soldier. Picture it a robust canvas bag, often in shades of olive green or khaki, designed to withstand the brutal realities of war. Its structure was straightforward, a main compartment offering ample space, cleverly divided to help organize its precious contents. On the exterior, two smaller, often rectangular, outer pockets provided quick access to frequently needed items. The corners and stress points were often reinforced with sturdy leather, a detail that spoke to an anticipation of rough handling and prolonged use. This was not a delicate item. It was built to endure the mud of Russian autumn, the snows of winter, and the relentless wear of endless marches. What truly gave the Red Army soldier his distinctive silhouette on the march, however, was not just the rucksack itself, but the way his greatcoat was incorporated into the load. Imagine the thick, heavy wool greatcoat, rolled tightly, almost like a cylindrical bolster, and then carefully strapped around the outside of the rucksack. This method served multiple purposes. It kept the bulky coat secure and out of the way. It provided an additional layer of protection for the rucksack's contents. And most importantly, it offered a unique visual signature that became synonymous with the Soviet infantrymen, a silhouette that would be etched into the collective memory of the war. The sight of these rolling forms, moving across the landscape, evoked a sense of quiet, almost stoic, resilience. The outer pockets, easily accessible, were reserved for the small, personal items that offered a semblance of normalcy in a chaotic world. Here, a soldier might meticulously store a straight razor, its edge perhaps dulled by repeated use, alongside a simple toothbrush and a small tube of toothpaste. Fragments of a civilian routine clinging to a military existence, a gun cleaning kit, an essential for maintaining the lifeblood of his defense, would also find its place, its oily scent a constant reminder of his primary duty. For some, a separate bread bag was often added, a simple cloth satchel used to carry their mess kit, a tin plate, a cup, and, most critically, their daily ration of black bread and perhaps a piece of salted fat. These were the small comforts, the tangible links to a life beyond the battlefield. Yet, the M39 rucksack, for all its initial practicality, faced an inevitable reality: the escalating demands of total war. Its somewhat complex design, with the multiple leather reinforcements and the partitioned interior, proved too time-consuming and expensive for the frantic pace of mass wartime production. As the conflict deepened and stretched on, simplicity became the ultimate necessity, and the M39 was eventually replaced by even more basic, easier-to-manufacture designs. This shift reflected the harsh trade-offs war demanded, where expediency often trumped ideal functionality. But for those who carried it in the early, desperate days of the war, The M39 rucksack held more than just gear. To open a soldier's pack was to glimpse a fragment of his soul, a window into his personal world. Beyond the uniforms and the tools of war, one might find a crumpled letter from a mother, its delicate script speaking of home and longing, or a faded photograph of a sweetheart, tucked away for safekeeping. And always, almost invariably, a scrap of black bread, often hardened, a stark symbol of sustenance, of the preciousness of life itself. These were not just items. They were anchors to humanity, quiet whispers of the lives these men had left behind, and the reasons they fought to endure. The M39 rucksack, in its very being, became a silent narrator of personal stories, a canvas for the quiet resilience of men facing an unimaginable future. In the vast and often unforgiving landscapes where the Red Army operated, especially during the brutal early years of the war, survival hinged on the most basic provisions: shelter, warmth, and the ability to endure the elements. Among the most iconic and essential pieces of equipment was the plash palatka, a marvel of multifunctionality that served as far more than just a rain cape. Its very existence spoke volumes about the Soviet approach to military logistics: simple, versatile, and designed for maximum utility with minimal resources. Imagine a soldier, miles from any permanent shelter, the sky opening up with a sudden, chilling downpour. He might be hunched under his plash palatka, the thin, yet remarkably durable sheet of canvas or treated cotton providing the only barrier between his skin and the relentless torrent. It was a stark image of vulnerability and resilience, a solitary figure dwarfed by the immense expanse of the landscape, relying on a single piece of cloth to stave off hypothermia, to maintain a fleeting moment of dry comfort amidst the pervasive dampness. This rain cape was his personal sanctuary, however meager. But the Posiba Palatka was much more than a cape. Its clever design, featuring grommets and buttons along its edges, allowed it to transform. Two or more soldiers could button their palatkas together to create a rudimentary tent, a temporary haven from the wind and rain, perhaps even offering a fleeting sense of communal warmth. In an emergency, it could be improvised into a stretcher, offering a painful but vital means of transporting a wounded comrade. And in the most somber of circumstances, it often served as a shroud, offering a final, dignified covering for the fallen, a stark and haunting reminder of war's ultimate reality. The palatka, therefore, became a silent witness to the full spectrum of military life, from mundane daily discomfort to the most profound moments of sacrifice. Beneath this outer layer, the soldier's undergarments provided a foundational level of protection against the often extreme temperatures. He was typically issued simple cotton undershirts, either round-necked or V-necked, paired with long underpants. For the biting cold of winter, heavier cotton variants were provided, designed to offer a modest, yet crucial, degree of insulation. Each man was usually issued 2 sets, a practical arrangement that allowed for a basic rotation. As they marched through the churned mud and unforgiving snow, one set would be worn, slowly absorbing sweat and grime, while the other, perhaps slightly less soiled, awaited its turn. There was little opportunity for washing, of course. So this rotation was more about managing the discomfort and the inevitable accumulation of dampness. The simplicity of these garments, their unadorned functionality, became another quiet symbol of the austerity that pervaded the Red Army's existence. Even the most intimate items reflected the scarcity and the unwavering emphasis on endurance. The imagery of the plashpalatka sometimes wrapped around the wounded, cradling them as best as it could, or draped over the still forms of the dead, whispering of their final journey, is profoundly moving. It reinforces the grim realities of conflict, where every item, even something as unassuming as a rain cape, carried a weight of emotional significance far beyond its material worth. These simple pieces of equipment were not just tools. They were silent companions through fear, through exhaustion, through loss. The overarching message conveyed by the Magyuan, plashpalatka, and the humble undergarments was one of profound wisdom. Simplicity was not a weakness. On the contrary, it became a powerful teacher, an unyielding drill sergeant, training these men for unparalleled survival. Without the luxury of complex, specialized gear, they learned to be resourceful, to adapt, to make do with what they had, and to find strength in their own ingenuity. This forced simplicity cultivated a deep-seated resilience, forging a spirit of self-reliance that would prove invaluable as the war unfolded. It was a quiet lesson, learned through discomfort and hardship, that would echo through the long, arduous years of conflict. A testament to the enduring power of the human spirit when pushed to its very limits. Among the various items issued to a Soviet soldier, the gas mask and its accompanying bag represented a fascinating paradox of military doctrine versus battlefield pragmatism. From 1938 to 1942, the standard issue included the M1936 gas mask bag, housing the SHM-1 mask and the MT-4 filter. These were instruments born from the terrifying lessons of World War I, when chemical weapons had wrought unprecedented horrors upon the trenches. The very presence of these items spoke of a chilling preparation for a future where poison gas might once again blanket the battlefield, a threat that lingered in the collective military consciousness of the time. However, the reality on the Eastern Front, especially in the early stages of World War II, quickly diverted from these grim expectations. While chemical warfare was a constant fear, it was never widely employed by either side. As such, the gas mask, a bulky and often cumbersome piece of equipment, found itself relegated to a secondary and often entirely different purpose. The Soviet soldiers, with their ingrained pragmatism and acute understanding of their immediate needs, began to repurpose their gas mask bags, transforming them from instruments of defense against an unseen enemy into incredibly versatile personal satchels. Imagine the typical contents of such a bag, no longer just the rubber mask and filter, but perhaps a soldier's meager food rations for the day, a hunk of black bread, a dried fish, or a few hard biscuits. The pungent smell of tobacco might emanate from within, as cigarettes, perhaps rolled from low-quality local blends, found their home there. A small, battery-operated flashlight, a rare luxury for many, might be tucked alongside, its beam a tiny beacon in the endless nights. Most profoundly, these bags often cradled precious letters from home, their fragile paper carrying the scent of ink and distant memories, along with a worn leather wallet, perhaps containing a few rubles or a cherished photograph of a loved one. Each item, carefully chosen, revealed a soldier's priorities: survival, comfort, and the enduring connection to his personal world. This vivid contrast with their German counterparts is particularly striking. German soldiers, often adhering strictly to military regulations, carried their gas masks religiously, their neatly strapped bags an almost uniform part of their kit. For them, it was a piece of essential, even sacrosanct, equipment. But for the Red Army soldier, doctrine often bent to the will of practicality. The bulky mask was frequently discarded or left behind, deemed less crucial than the immediate need for personal storage. The bag, however, remained, transformed by ingenious necessity. The image is a powerful one, a canvas bag, originally designed to protect against the insidious threat of poison gas, now instead reeking faintly of tobacco, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of a lover's pressed flower, or holding a dog-eared photograph, a quiet link to a life far removed from the brutal front lines. It became, in essence, a personal locker, a small repository of the everyday and the deeply cherished, far from its intended purpose. This transformation of the gas mask bag into a personal satchel stands as a potent symbol of Soviet pragmatism on the battlefield. It speaks to a profound adaptability, an ability to make the most of limited resources, to bend regulations when common sense dictated, and to prioritize immediate, tangible needs over hypothetical threats. It underscores the resourcefulness of the individual soldier, who, faced with harsh realities, often found ingenious ways to adapt his equipment to suit his most pressing concerns. This seemingly small detail, the repurposing of a gas mask bag, offers a quiet yet profound insight into the mindset of the Red Army. An army that, by necessity, learned to redefine the meaning of utility and survival, finding strength and ingenuity in the very act of making do. It tells a story not of strict adherence, but of quiet, individual ingenuity in the face of immense pressure. Amidst the vastness of the Eastern Front, the daily ritual of eating and drinking transcended mere sustenance. It became a grounding force, a brief respite, and a quiet communal act. The items involved were, predictably, simple, reflecting the ethos of practicality and mass production. At the heart of a soldier's meal kit was the Mess Tin M1936, a clever and compact design. Imagine it a kidney-shaped, two-piece aluminum container, specifically designed to fit snugly against the body or inside a pack without creating awkward bulk. The lid, often doubling as a shallow plate, typically featured a small, foldable handle, allowing it to be heated over an open flame or carried with ease. This tin was not merely for eating, it was often the vessel for cooking, warming meager rations, or even boiling water when a fire could be managed. Accompanying the mess tin were the simple drinking cups. These were typically made of lightweight aluminum, much like the mess tin, or sometimes from enamel-coated steel, which, while more robust, was also prone to chipping, revealing the dark metal underneath like tiny scars. Each chip told a silent story of countless uses, of being dropped, of being scraped clean, of enduring the rigors of a soldier's life. The spoon, the soldier's primary utensil, was either standard issue, often a simple, unadorned steel or aluminum design, or, just as frequently, scavenged or personally carved from wood. A wooden spoon, meticulously shaped, carried a warmth and an individuality that its metallic counterpart could not. A small piece of craftsmanship amidst the brutality. The typical meal itself was a stark reflection of the realities of war and the limitations of supply lines. Black bread, dense and often sourdough, was the absolute staple. A dark, earthy foundation for every meal. It was often coarse, sometimes even slightly stale, but it provided essential calories and a profound sense of fullness. Accompanying this might be a thin soup, often a watery broth with a few vegetables, perhaps a hint of meat if fortunes were favorable. Potatoes, readily available and hearty, often formed a substantial part of the meal, boiled or roasted over an open fire. and to provide crucial energy and warmth. A small chunk of fat, perhaps salted pork fat or butter, would be offered, a precious commodity to be savored. These meals, while simple, were the fuel that kept the Red Army moving, fighting, and enduring. The act of eating was often a quiet affair, shared in silence, perhaps around a flickering campfire or huddled in a dugout. Imagine the scene: soldiers passing a canteen from hand to hand, each man taking a measured sip of water, the liquid a precious commodity in itself. The silence was not one of discomfort, but of shared understanding, of mutual reliance, and of the unspoken weight of their shared circumstances. The canteen, typically a 1932 aluminum model, often came with a sturdy cloth carrier, protecting the metal from dents and helping to insulate its contents. Its lid was almost invariably attached by a small chain, preventing it from being lost in the chaos of movement or battle. Despite the issuance of canteens, the harsh reality of the front lines often dictated more desperate measures for hydration. Men frequently drank straight from rivers and streams, risking contamination or melted snow and ice during the brutal winters, boiling it when possible, but often consuming it raw out of necessity. The constant demand for water, for any liquid to quench the thirst brought on by exertion and fear, was a pervasive struggle. The memory of clear, fresh water from a village well or a clean spring became a distant luxury, replaced by the ever-present challenge of finding and securing enough to survive. Thus, the simple act of eating and drinking becomes a narrative in itself. It's a story of essential needs met with minimal resources, of a profound appreciation for every morsel, every sip. It speaks to the ingenuity of the human spirit in finding comfort and communion amidst deprivation. These humble items, the mess tin, the cup, the spoon, the canteen, were more than just tools for survival. They were quiet witnesses to the soldier's daily struggle, symbols of his resilience, and often the silent centerpiece of moments of shared humanity on the desolate and unforgiving battlefields of the Eastern Front. As we continue our journey into the practical world of the Red Army soldier, we turn our attention to the essential items that were the very architecture of his combat readiness: the belts, ammunition pouches, and the precious, life-sustaining bullets. These components, while seemingly mundane, formed the crucial nexus between the soldier and his ability to defend himself and his comrades. The foundation of this system was the belt, typically crafted from either sturdy leather or robust webbing, measuring approximately 1.5 to 2 inches wide. This belt was not just for holding up trousers, it was the primary anchor for a soldier's vital gear, carefully designed to bear the weight of his fighting load. Attached to this belt were the M1937 ammunition pouches, specifically designed to hold 3 clips of Mosin Nagant rifle ammunition, each clip containing 5 rounds. This meant each pouch, when fully loaded, held 15 rounds of the powerful 7.62 54R cartridge, a caliber that had served the Russian military for decades and would continue to do so with unwavering reliability. A standard load for a soldier usually involved 2 of these main pouches, placing a total of 30 rounds directly accessible on his person. However, given the intensity of combat and the inherent unreliability of supply lines, an auxiliary cloth pouch, often a simple fabric bag, would be added, typically containing an additional 20 rounds. This brought the total on-person ammunition to a modest 50 rounds. To put this in perspective, compared to the sustained firepower often depicted in popular media, this was a relatively limited supply. underscoring the critical importance of marksmanship, fire discipline, and ammunition conservation. This seemingly modest allocation of ammunition highlights a chronic and pervasive issue shortage. Throughout the war, Red Army soldiers frequently faced the grim reality of insufficient supplies. As a direct consequence, the act of scavenging ammunition from fallen comrades, regardless of their nationality, became a grim but necessary practice. Every single 7.62 54R round was therefore not just a piece of brass and lead. It was both a weapon and an incredibly precious commodity. A tangible link to survival that could not be wasted. The metallic gleam of a freshly loaded clip, the satisfying click as it seated into the rifle's internal magazine. These were small assurances in a world filled with uncertainty. To help distribute the considerable weight of the belt and its attached pouches, soldiers also utilized Y-straps. These suspenders, as we will explore in a later scene, connected to the belt at various points, drawing the load upwards and across the shoulders, thereby reducing the strain on the hips and lower back, particularly during long marches. This complex system, while effective when properly adjusted, added another layer to the soldier's already intricate daily routine of equipping himself. Imagine the quiet, almost sacred, ritual of a soldier preparing for patrol or an impending attack. He might carefully count his rounds, perhaps meticulously cleaning each one of any mud or dust. Picture his frostbitten fingers, stiff and numb in the bitter cold, fumbling with the small, metallic clips, attempting to load them swiftly and precisely into the internal magazine of his Mosin Nagant rifle. This wasn't merely a mechanical act. It was a deeply personal interaction with his primary tool of survival. Each round represented a potential shot at an enemy, a chance to protect his position, or a last desperate defense of his life. The combination of belts, pouches, and ammunition, therefore, speaks volumes about the Red Army's operational realities. It highlights an army that, by necessity, was taught to be economical, to conserve, and to rely on its soldiers' ability to make do with what little they had. These items were not just gear, they were vital extensions of the soldier's will, the means by which he engaged with the brutal world around him. Each component a silent testament to the daily struggle for survival and the profound value placed on every single bullet. It was a system built on robust simplicity, but one that demanded unwavering discipline and resourcefulness from the men who wore it. As our understanding of the Soviet soldiers' equipment deepens, we encounter another triad of essential items, each imbued with its own story of utility, adaptation, and stark necessity: the grenade, the canteen, and perhaps most surprisingly, the entrenching shovel. These were the tools of both offense and defense, of immediate danger and quiet, persistent survival. First, let us consider the RGD-33 stick grenade. This was not a simple, single-purpose explosive device, but rather an ingeniously adaptable weapon. Its design allowed it to be used in two distinct configurations offensively, with a fragmentation sleeve attached, which distributed shrapnel over a wider area, making it ideal for clearing enemy positions, and defensively, without the sleeve, providing a more contained blast suitable for close-quarters combat, or when seeking to disorient rather than simply destroy. The grenade pouch, often a simple canvas bag, was designed to carry two of these powerful tools, along with their separate fuses, which the soldier would insert just prior to throwing. The clunk of these grenades against the soldier's thigh during a march, the slight sway of their weight, was a constant, unsettling reminder of the explosive power at his disposal, a stark contrast to the quiet moments of the long march. Then there was the aluminum canteen, typically the 1932 model we touched upon earlier, a humble yet indispensable vessel. With its fabric cover, often a faded khaki or olive green, and its toggle closure, it represented the ever-present need for hydration. While we've spoken of the thirst and the desperate measures for water, the canteen itself was a source of small comfort, a familiar shape carried close to the body. The rhythmic sloshing of water within it, a quiet accompaniment to the soldier's footsteps, was a sound of life, a promise of temporary relief from the parched throat and the weary body. It was refilled at every opportunity, cherished and guarded, a small reservoir of hope in a world of constant deprivation. But perhaps no item embodies the Red Army soldier's ethos of multifunctionality and sheer endurance more profoundly than the entrenching shovel. This was not merely a tool for digging, though that was its primary function, essential for creating defensive positions, foxholes, and shallow graves. Its robust design and sharpened edge meant it could also be wielded as an axe for chopping through undergrowth or firewood. Its flat blade could serve as a makeshift hammering surface, driving in tent pegs or repairing equipment. In a pinch, heated over a fire. It could even become a crude frying pan for cooking meager rations. Most strikingly, however, the entrenching shovel frequently transformed into a brutal, close-quarters weapon. When ammunition ran low, or in the terrifying intimacy of hand-to-hand combat, the shovel, with its sturdy wooden handle and sharp steel blade, became a devastating instrument. Imagine the vivid, chilling image of a shovel blade, not stained with mud or earth, but with something far more visceral, the grim residue of brutal, desperate combat. It was a weapon of last resort, a testament to the savagery of the fighting and the grim determination of the soldiers who wielded it. The shovel, therefore, transcended its utilitarian purpose to become a profound symbol for the Red Army soldier. It was his closest companion, a silent witness to every aspect of his grueling existence. From digging his shelter to defending his life, it was always there, reliable and ever-present. This deep connection was encapsulated in a powerful saying that echoed through the ranks. A soldier might lose his rifle, but never his shovel. This maxim underscored the shovel's irreplaceable value, not just as a tool, but as a symbol of self-reliance, of the fundamental ability to protect oneself and to carve out a meager existence from the unforgiving earth. These items, the grenade, the canteen, and the shovel, collectively paint a picture of an army defined by its stark efficiency, its resourcefulness, and the unwavering resilience of the men who carried them. To understand the full weight, literally and figuratively, of a Soviet soldier's kit, we must delve into the intricate system of webbing and straps that held it all together. This network of leather or canvas was more than just an accessory. It was the skeletal structure of his combat load, designed to balance the diverse array of items we've discussed. At the core of this system were the Y-shaped suspenders, a crucial component for distributing the often considerable weight of equipment across the shoulders, aiming to alleviate some of the strain on the lower back and hips during the relentless marches. Imagine the soldier's morning ritual, perhaps in the dim light of dawn, or by the flickering glow of a dugout lamp. The setup was far from intuitive, requiring a precise and often time-consuming threading of the belt through various loops on the pouches, which then connected to the suspenders. Each strap, each buckle, each connection point had its place in an exact order, a specific sequence to ensure the load was distributed evenly and securely. This wasn't a quick, casual arrangement. It was a meticulous preparation for the day's unknown demands. The Y-straps themselves were designed with a degree of adjustability, typically offering 3 different lengths to accommodate the varying physiques of individual soldiers. This attempt at customization, however, often fell short in the chaotic reality of wartime, where individual adjustments were often rushed or neglected in favor of expediency. Nevertheless, the intent was to provide a better ergonomic fit, to make the heavy loads slightly more manageable. Men would spend precious minutes each morning, or before embarking on a long march, carefully donning and adjusting their gear. The rustle of canvas, the creak of leather, the metallic clink of buckles. These were the quiet sounds of an army preparing. A daily symphony of individual effort contributing to the collective readiness. This deliberate process was a small, almost meditative act in the face of the impending chaos. Comparing this setup to the gear of their German adversaries often revealed a striking difference. German equipment, renowned for its meticulous engineering, often presented a tidier, more organized appearance, with specialized compartments and more refined fittings. Soviet gear, by contrast, frequently bore the marks of improvisation. While functional, it often looked looser, less uniformly aligned, reflecting the pressures of mass production and the necessity of making do. It spoke to a different philosophy, one that prioritized rugged functionality and adaptability over aesthetic precision. However, as the war dragged on, as the marches grew longer and the battles more desperate, the very complexity of the suspenders began to work against the soldiers. The weight, even when distributed, was still immense. The constant need for speed, for agility, for the ability to move quickly and unencumbered, often led to a significant shift in practice. Many soldiers, prioritizing mobility and the immediate demands of combat over strict regulation, began to abandon the suspenders entirely. They would rely solely on their belts, perhaps accepting a less ergonomic load in exchange for the freedom of movement. This wasn't a casual disregard for discipline, but a hard-won lesson learned in the crucible of battle lightness. In the end, mattered more than rigid adherence to regulations. The ability to sprint, to duck, to maneuver swiftly could mean the difference between life and death. This evolution in how the webbing and straps were utilized provides a subtle but profound insight into the brutal pragmatism of the Red Army. It tells a story of an army constantly adapting, shedding anything deemed non-essential, and redefining efficiency based on the harsh dictates of the front. The intricate dance of straps and buckles, once a careful morning ritual, slowly gave way to the raw, visceral need for speed and survival. It was a quiet testament to the enduring power of human adaptation, a lesson whispered by the wind across countless battlefields. Beyond the rucksacks, the mess tins, and the ammunition lay the uniform itself, the outward manifestation of the Soviet soldier. Yet beneath its practical design beat the heart of a man. The uniform, particularly the M35 tunic, presented a picture of rugged utility, crafted from sturdy cotton for the warmer months and heavier wool for the biting Russian winters. It was designed for endurance. Elbows were often reinforced, acknowledging the wear and tear of crawling, resting, and fighting in the field. Small details, like the 1940 insignia, a subtle triangle, often with red piping and crossed rifles, were sewn onto the collar tabs, quietly proclaiming rank and branch of service, a whisper of formal identity within the vast collective. The lower half of the uniform, however, presented a more distinct and often challenging aspect. Low boots paired with puttees. Puttees were strips of cloth, typically wool or canvas, meticulously wrapped around the lower leg, from ankle to just below the knee, serving as a protective gaiter. Sometimes, in desperate circumstances, old blankets would be repurposed for this essential function. This wrapping was a skill in itself, requiring precision to ensure a snug fit that wouldn't unravel during long marches, yet wasn't so tight as to cut off circulation. The feel of the rough fabric against the skin, the slight pressure as they were wound, became a constant sensation for the soldier. The reality of these puttees on the march was often a grim one. Imagine the relentless mud of the Russian autumn, a thick, tenacious goo that clung to everything. Picture the puttees, once neatly wrapped, now utterly soaked and caked with mud, hardening into stiff, malodorous casts as they dried, reeking with the pervasive scent of mildew and damp earth. This constant dampness and friction often led to agonizing chafing, skin irritation, and even trench foot, a persistent enemy in its own right. They were a testament to the sheer physical discomfort that was an unyielding companion to the Soviet soldier. Observing a column of Red Army soldiers from afar, the impression might have been one of stoic uniformity. The lines of olive green or drab brown, the rolling greatcoats, the rhythmic stride, it all spoke of a unified, disciplined force. But as one drew closer, the individual realities became strikingly apparent. These uniforms were rarely pristine. They were often patched, sometimes crudely, with whatever fabric was available, revealing a profound lack of standardization and a testament to the constant need for repair and reuse. A missing button replaced with a twig, a tear roughly stitched with coarse thread. Each imperfection told a story of hardship, of resourcefulness, of the relentless wear and tear of war. Up close, the picture was less of pristine order and more of ragged, enduring humanity. It was not until later in the war, notably through the Lend-Lease program with the Western Allies, that better quality, standardized boots began to arrive, offering a rare luxury of comfort and durability. But in the crucial, desperate year of 1941, such comforts were virtually unknown, almost mythical. The low boots and puttees were the standard, a gritty, tangible symbol of the early Red Army's struggle, a quiet testament to their ability to endure discomfort as a fundamental aspect of their duty. The uniform, therefore, became a second skin, absorbing the sweat, the mud, the blood, and the stories of the men within. It was a canvas upon which the brutal realities of war were etched, a silent chronicle of individual endurance within a collective struggle. It was a powerful, if simple, testament to the human spirit's capacity to persevere, to find strength not in luxury, but in the raw, unyielding demands of survival. As our journey through the quiet artifacts of the Soviet soldier draws to a close, we arrive at two elements that, in their contrasting forms, encapsulate the essence of his identity and his means of survival: the identification booklet and the ever-reliable Mosin Nagant rifle. These items, one a fragile piece of paper, the other a robust instrument of war, together tell a profound story of individual existence amidst monumental conflict. At the outbreak of the war in June 1941, a stark and unsettling reality prevailed, perhaps even most. Red Army soldiers had no official identification. In the confusion of rapid mobilization and the sheer scale of the conflict, the bureaucratic mechanisms simply couldn't keep pace. This absence of formal identity papers meant that, for countless men, their only proof of who they were, their only tangible link to a life beyond the uniform, were the letters they carried from home. Imagine these letters, often crumpled and worn, their ink perhaps smudged by dampness or repeated handling, each one a precious fragment of family, of love, of a life waiting to be returned to. These were more than just communications. They were the quiet keepers of their very being. It wasn't until October 1941, months into the devastating invasion, that new photo ID booklets finally began to be issued. A belated attempt to bring order to the human chaos. The arrival of these small, official documents, bearing a grainy photograph and a few handwritten details, was a significant moment. A quiet reaffirmation of individual existence within the vast, impersonal machinery of war. Alongside this fragile assertion of identity stood the primary weapon of the Red Army soldier, the Mosin-Nagant rifle. This was no new, cutting-edge marvel of engineering. Rather, it was a venerable veteran. A bolt-action rifle that had seen decades of service across multiple conflicts. Its design, while simple, was renowned for its unwavering reliability, its robustness, and its ability to withstand the harshest conditions imaginable. From the vast, open plains to the dense, frozen forests, the Mosin-Nagant was a constant companion, its presence a comforting weight in a soldier's hands. The emotional detail of the Mosin-Nagant is found in its iconic sound, the metallic clack of its bolt being cycled. A distinctive, unmistakable sound that echoed across countless battlefields. It was a sound of preparation, of action, of desperate defense. For a soldier, this sound was as familiar as his own heartbeat, a deep, resonant reassurance in the face of chaos. It was the sound of life, of survival, and of a relentless will to fight. Each rifle, often worn smooth in places from countless hours of handling, bore its own silent history, its own record of battles fought and lives changed. From the crumpled letters, smelling of home and hope, to the sturdy wooden stock of the Mosin-Nagant, scarred by use and imbued with purpose, every single item carried by the Red Army soldier told a story. It was a story not just of war, but of the human spirit's enduring capacity for survival, for love, for resilience. These were men who had little, yet they turned that scarcity into a profound source of strength. They learned to be resourceful, to adapt, to find power in their collective will, and to make every meager item count. And that, in its most profound sense, is why the Red Army endured. Not because of endless resources or flawless equipment, but because of the men who composed its ranks, men who found strength in simplicity, who held on to their humanity through the smallest, most personal items, and who wielded their humble tools with unwavering resolve. Their story is a quiet testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a narrative whispered by the winds of history, reminding us that even in the most brutal of times, the quiet dignity of the individual perseveres. As the last echoes of their story gently fade into the stillness of the night, we are left with a quiet appreciation for their journey and the enduring lessons it offers about resilience, resourcefulness, and the quiet, unwavering spirit of humanity.